In steel design, we often talk about types of failure, especially when it comes to pretty much any design problem. Conceptual questions can often be about the type of failure. And if we're talking about tension members, say we have this plate here that we're going to assume is a brace or something like that that is being in tension. Often things that we're going to talk about are rupture, we're going to talk about yielding, and we're going to talk about block shear. But what do those terms actually mean, and what do those failures look like? So yielding and rupture are the two that most often govern. If you've done any sort of design problem, you probably know this, but what would each of these look like? So if we were talking about yielding failure, let's say we're considering the gross area of it. Let's look at this section right here. Say it's going to fail along this line with yielding failure. What that means is when we have this finish, it's going to start to neck down in here. So it's going to start to give. And if any of you have taken a strength of materials class or a material science lab, you may have done a problem with I can't exactly remember what it's called, but basically you get a test blank that looks something like this, and you're going to put it into a machine, and you're going to pull it, and then you're watching this section right here to see when it yields or even completely snaps. And that yielding is when it starts to neck and pull apart. So these two start to pull apart, and you'll see that the strain starts to deform the material. So then the next one that we need to look at is rupture. So rupture would be, instead of failing along this gross area that we're talking about with yielding, we're looking at essentially what if it failed along this line. And what would that failure look like? Well, that would basically be, if I can draw it here, that was not a good line. If I could draw this right here, basically it's going to snap in half. There may be a little bit of, it depends on exactly what type of failure it is, if it's ductile or if it's brittle, but essentially these are going to snap right in half along that plane because it's weakest along this line where there's the least material in that cross-sectional area. So the last thing is block shear, and block shear is a combination of tension and then yielding. So that would happen something along this line here, and it's basically saying this entire section here would tear out. So if I were to redraw this, we'd be able to fit the one piece back into the other, but this would have completely failed along this surface here. So this would be a hole, this would be a hole. Well, actually, that's a terrible way of drawing it. It would fail along these lines. And essentially what you're dealing with is, my goodness, I keep misdrawing it. You're dealing with tension on this line, and then you're dealing with shear failure along these lines from the material being pulled this way. So that's just a little visualization on what these materials are actually doing when they're failing, and I hope this was helpful.